Have you ever wondered what it truly takes to get rich? Is it just luck, hard work, or something more profound? Imagine having a blueprint from someone who has done it, becoming a millionaire, not through inheritance or luck, but through grit, strategy, and relentless drive. Felix Dennis, the founder of Maxim magazine and one of the wealthiest self-made millionaires, shares exactly how he did it in his brutally honest book, How to Get Rich. If you're serious about wealth, this isn't just another motivational pep talk. It's a practical, no-nonsense guide from someone who lived and breathed the journey to immense wealth. Are you ready to hear the truth about how to get rich? Chapter 1. Reasons Not to Get Rich. Imagine sitting across from a self-made millionaire, someone who has amassed unimaginable wealth. But instead of selling you dreams, they look you straight in the eye and tell you, "Don't bother." That's exactly how Felix Dennis begins his unconventional guide to wealth, by warning you off the idea of getting rich altogether. He doesn't sugarcoat it. Getting rich, according to Dennis, is an exhausting, soul-draining process that can leave you emotionally and spiritually bankrupt if you're not careful. He knows because he's lived it. Dennis starts by dismantling the common fantasy many people hold about wealth, the idea that money will magically make everything better. You might think that a few million in the bank would solve your problems, ease your anxieties, and bring happiness. But Dennis says this simply isn't the case. Money won't cure loneliness, depression, or self-doubt. In fact, the pursuit of wealth can exacerbate these issues. He's brutally honest about the personal sacrifices required. Late nights, endless stress, and a creeping sense of isolation from family, friends, and even yourself. But why would a man so wealthy advise you against pursuing the same path? Because Dennis doesn't want to sell you a fantasy. He's not interested in perpetuating the myth that wealth is the key to happiness or fulfillment. In fact, the pursuit of money for its own sake, he argues, often leads to disillusionment. He speaks candidly about how, at the height of his wealth, he found himself surrounded by luxury, but feeling emptier than ever. The yachts, the mansions, the extravagant parties, none of it filled the void. It was only after achieving wealth that he realized how little it did to satisfy deeper human needs. However, Dennis isn't trying to scare you away completely. His purpose is more to filter out those who are in it for the wrong reasons. If you're solely chasing money to fill emotional gaps, he suggests that you take a step back and reconsider. There are easier, healthier ways to find happiness. But if, after hearing all these warnings, you still feel compelled to chase wealth, not for happiness, but for the sheer thrill of the game, the challenge, and the possibilities that come with financial freedom, then Felix Dennis is ready to guide you. The tone is set early on. This is not going to be a motivational handbook filled with fluffy affirmations. Instead, it's going to be a no-nonsense, sometimes harsh, but ultimately truthful guide on what it really takes to get rich. And it all starts with asking yourself why you want it in the first place. Dennis challenges you to dig deep and confront your motivations. Do you want to prove something to yourself or others? Are you driven by the fear of failure or the hunger for success? Whatever your reason, you must be honest with yourself, because the path you're about to embark on is fraught with difficulty. Dennis admits that his own reasons for pursuing wealth were flawed. He sought power, validation, and the approval of others, but in the end, he found that those external rewards were hollow. What he didn't realize at the time was that the journey to wealth wasn't about the money. It was about mastering the art of business, overcoming obstacles, and pushing past limitations. And if that kind of challenge excites you, then maybe you're ready to take the plunge. In this opening chapter, Dennis doesn't just ask why you want to get rich. He forces you to confront the harsh realities of the pursuit. He paints a vivid picture of what life can become when your entire existence revolves around accumulating wealth. The toll it takes on your relationships, your health, and even your sense of self-worth is immense. Yet, for those who are truly driven, these sacrifices are part of the game. By the end of the chapter, you're left with a clear choice. Either turn back now and seek fulfillment in simpler, more meaningful pursuits, or strap in for a long, grueling journey that offers no guarantees of happiness, but the potential for extraordinary financial freedom. Dennis doesn't promise success, but he does promise that if you're willing to commit fully, knowing all the sacrifices and risks, you'll have a fighting chance at achieving real wealth. With the first chapter behind you, you've already crossed a critical threshold. You're no longer under the illusion that getting rich is easy or glamorous. You've been warned, and yet, if you're still here, it means you're ready to learn. Dennis has just begun to peel back the curtain on the realities of wealth creation, and what follows are the hard-earned lessons from a man who knows the business world inside out. But before you dive headlong into the quest for riches, Dennis asks you to pause and reflect. Why are you doing this? And more importantly, are you willing to pay the price? Chapter 2. How to Get Started. After painting a grim picture of the sacrifices required to get rich, Felix Dennis shifts gears in the second chapter by asking one critical question. If you've decided you still want to get rich, how do you begin? And here's where Dennis truly starts to show his expertise, explaining that the hardest step for most people is simply starting. The dream of wealth is seductive, but it remains just that, a dream, unless you take action. For Dennis, the key to getting started is breaking free from the paralysis of indecision. Most people, he says, spend far too much time waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect idea before they take their first step. But Dennis insists that there is no perfect time. If you wait for all the conditions to be right, you'll never begin. He encourages you to embrace uncertainty and just dive in. The chapter unfolds like a wake-up call for anyone who has been stuck in the planning phase for too long. Dennis admits that fear is a powerful force, but it's one that must be overcome. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of making the wrong decision. These are the enemies of wealth creation. And the only way to conquer these fears, Dennis argues, is through action. Once you take that first step, however small, you start building momentum, and with momentum comes progress. Dennis shares personal anecdotes from his early days in business to illustrate his point. He didn't start out with a grand vision or even a great idea. He started by taking small, practical steps, often without knowing where they would lead. His first ventures were riddled with mistakes and failures, but each one taught him valuable lessons and brought him closer to his ultimate goal. In hindsight, Dennis realized that what set him apart wasn't his intelligence or his creativity. It was his willingness to act when others hesitated. The underlying message of this chapter is simple. Stop waiting. Start doing. The pursuit of wealth is not for the overly cautious. You don't need to have everything figured out from the start. What you do need is the courage to leap and the resilience to keep leaping, even when you don't know exactly where you'll land. This chapter also introduces the concept of embracing imperfection. Dennis argues that one of the most dangerous traps in business is the quest for perfection. Entrepreneurs who obsess over perfecting their products, their marketing strategies, or their business plans often end up stalling, missing out on opportunities that arise from simply moving forward. The world, Dennis says, rewards those who act, not those who wait for the perfect conditions. To emphasize this point, Dennis provides real-life examples of successful business people who started with flawed products, imperfect strategies, or half-baked ideas, yet they still went on to achieve tremendous success. The secret, he says, lies in their ability to adapt and improve along the way. Getting rich is a process of constant iteration, not perfection. You must be willing to launch with something imperfect and refine it as you go. The second chapter also touches on the importance of self-belief. Dennis makes it clear that the road to wealth is fraught with challenges, and the only way to navigate them is to have an unshakable belief in yourself. This belief doesn't mean arrogance or overconfidence. It means having the inner conviction that, no matter what obstacles come your way, you'll figure out a way to overcome them. Dennis recounts moments when his self-belief wavered, and how he managed to push through despite the doubts. He advises that, especially in the early stages, it's crucial to surround yourself with people who support your vision and can help you maintain that self-belief. The company you keep, according to Dennis, can either fuel your confidence or drain it, so choose wisely. By the end of this chapter, Dennis has not only convinced you that starting is the most important step, but has also equipped you with the mindset needed to push forward. He doesn't pretend that the path will be easy, far from it, but he does remind you that the only way to reach your destination is to begin walking. In many ways, this chapter is about eliminating excuses. Dennis dismantles the common justifications people use for not starting: the lack of a perfect idea, the fear of failure, the quest for perfection, and replaces them with a simple, powerful truth. Those who get rich are the ones who start, and those who never start will never know what they're capable of. Chapter 3: The Fallacy of Great Ideas. After urging you to take action, Felix Dennis now moves on to another misconception that stops people from becoming wealthy: the belief that you need a brilliant, groundbreaking idea to make a fortune. Dennis doesn't mince words here. Great ideas are overrated. Most people imagine that the path to riches begins with a flash of inspiration, a revolutionary product, or a market-shaking innovation. But Dennis insists that this simply isn't true. The essence of this chapter is execution over ideas. Dennis explains that ideas are worthless without execution, and more often than not, the people who become wealthy are not the ones with the best ideas, but the ones who know how to implement even average ones with relentless determination. In fact, Dennis argues that many of the wealthiest individuals didn't invent something new or revolutionary. They just took an existing concept and did it better, faster, or on a larger scale. The chapter begins with Dennis debunking the myth that success comes from having a eureka moment. He recounts stories from his own life, where he started ventures that weren't particularly innovative, yet they still generated massive wealth because he executed them effectively. He talks about his work in publishing, where he didn't invent the idea of magazines but took existing concepts and repackaged them in ways that appealed to different audiences. It was the execution, how he brought these products to market and scaled them, that made all the difference. Dennis emphasizes that most successful entrepreneurs didn't wait for lightning to strike with a perfect idea. Instead, they identified gaps in the market, took existing products, and found ways to improve upon them. He refers to countless examples of business magnates who made their fortunes by simply capitalizing on what was already there, either by offering better service, improving efficiency, or reaching a previously untapped customer base. The central lesson here is that waiting for a genius idea is a trap. Many aspiring entrepreneurs waste years chasing that elusive lightbulb moment, but Dennis argues that what matters is your ability to take action on even a mediocre idea. The ability to execute consistently, to push forward when others hesitate, is what sets successful people apart from the dreamers. As Dennis explains, the market doesn't reward you for having the best idea. It rewards you for delivering results. And results come from action. It's not enough to sit around brainstorming, planning, and refining. At some point, you have to launch. You have to put your product or service out there, even if it's not perfect, and learn from the feedback and failures that come your way. The more you execute, the more you refine, and the closer you get to something that works. This chapter is also a call to those who might be waiting for inspiration to strike before they act. Dennis stresses that wealth comes to those who hustle, who grind, who act, not to those who are sitting around waiting for the next big thing to pop into their heads. And often, the simplest ideas executed with precision can be the most profitable. He gives examples of businesses that made millions by focusing on everyday items like toothpaste or toilet paper, but delivering them in a better, more efficient way. Dennis also talks about the emotional component of execution. It's easy to dream up big ideas, but executing those ideas requires resilience, dedication, and often a willingness to push through failure. Dennis discusses how many entrepreneurs start with what they believe is a great idea, only to find that it doesn't resonate with the market. The key, he says, is not to give up, but to pivot, refine, and keep pushing forward. If you get too attached to your initial idea, you risk losing sight of what really matters, what works in the real world. He provides real-life examples of how ideas often evolve in unexpected ways. What you start with may not be what ultimately leads to wealth. The product or service you first bring to market might need to change multiple times before it hits the sweet spot. Dennis stresses that this is not a failure, but part of the process. The willingness to adapt and iterate is far more valuable than the initial idea itself. Towards the end of the chapter, Dennis delves deeper into the psychology behind why people cling to the myth of the great idea. He believes it's because having a great idea is safe. It allows people to dream without having to face the realities of execution. As long as you're sitting on your brilliant idea, you don't have to deal with the potential for failure, criticism, or hard work. It's comfortable to stay in the realm of possibilities. But wealth doesn't come from possibilities. It comes from actions, from doing. Dennis concludes by urging readers to abandon the quest for the perfect idea and instead focus on finding something they can execute well. He reminds you that the marketplace is full of mediocre ideas executed brilliantly and empty of brilliant ideas executed poorly. The real secret, he insists, is not in waiting for inspiration, but in developing the skill to take any idea, no matter how average, and turn it into a success through hard work, persistence, and execution. With this chapter, Dennis hopes to free you from the mental trap of idea chasing. He wants you to understand that action, not genius, is the cornerstone of wealth creation. By the time you finish this chapter, you'll be ready to stop waiting for the perfect idea and start executing the one in front of you. Chapter 4. Ownership, the single most important word in wealth creation. Having debunked the myth of the great idea, Felix Dennis now turns to what he considers the single most important element of wealth creation: ownership. In this chapter, Dennis delivers one of the book's most critical messages. If you want to get rich, you must own the business or product you're building. This, he insists, is non-negotiable. Dennis begins by explaining why ownership is so crucial. In business, there are countless ways to make money, but only a few ways to get rich. And the most reliable path to wealth, according to Dennis, is to own the thing that generates the money. Whether it's a company, intellectual property, or a product, the key is to ensure that you control it, rather than working for someone else or giving away too much equity. Ownership is the difference between making a good living and building substantial wealth. To drive this point home, Dennis shares several stories from his own career, where he almost gave away too much ownership in exchange for short-term gains. In each case, he explains how retaining ownership allowed him to reap enormous rewards later on, even if it meant suffering through lean times initially. For Dennis, it wasn't about making quick money. It was about playing the long game, where the real wealth lies. One of the most important lessons in this chapter is about equity. Many entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages of a business, are tempted to trade equity for cash, partnerships, or expertise. Dennis warns against this practice, arguing that giving away too much ownership too soon can cripple your chances of becoming truly wealthy. He encourages readers to think carefully about every equity deal and to guard ownership fiercely. If you have to give up some equity, he advises doing so as sparingly as possible and always maintaining control. Dennis uses the analogy of a tree to illustrate this point. When you plant a tree, it takes time to grow. You may not see the fruits immediately, but over time, if you nurture it and protect it, that tree will bear abundant fruit. However, if you chop off its branches too soon, by giving away too much ownership, it will never grow to its full potential. The same goes for businesses. Retain ownership, nurture your business, and over time, it will produce more wealth than you could imagine. This chapter also delves into the psychology of ownership. Dennis believes that owning something changes your relationship with it. When you own a business, you're not just an employee or a partner, you are the captain of the ship. This sense of ownership gives you a different kind of motivation. You're no longer working for a paycheck. You're building something that belongs to you, something that can grow and multiply your wealth over time. Ownership instills a sense of pride, responsibility, and long-term thinking that you simply don't get as an employee or minority stakeholder. As Dennis explains, ownership also offers freedom, financial freedom, creative freedom, and the freedom to take risks. When you own the business, you call the shots. You're not beholden to anyone else's agenda, and you don't have to compromise your vision. This autonomy is what allows entrepreneurs to make bold moves, take risks, and ultimately reap the rewards. However, Dennis is also realistic about the challenges of maintaining ownership, particularly in the early stages of a business. There will be times when you're strapped for cash or tempted to bring in partners or investors to lighten the load. But Dennis urges you to resist the temptation to sell off chunks of your business in exchange for short-term relief. He acknowledges that there are times when bringing in investors is necessary, but he advises doing so in a way that preserves your control and ownership as much as possible. Dennis's stories from the business world underscore just how critical ownership is. He recounts moments when competitors tried to buy him out, when partners wanted more equity, and when he could have cashed out for a comfortable life. But each time, Dennis chose to stay in control, to keep ownership, and in the long run, that decision made him far wealthier than if he had taken the easy money. The chapter ends with a powerful message. Ownership is power. If you want to get rich, you must not only create value, but also retain control of that value. Don't sell yourself short for quick gains. Play the long game, and the rewards will follow. Chapter 5. Resilience and Failure. As we venture deeper into Felix Dennis's blueprint for getting rich, it becomes clear that resilience and the ability to recover from failure are critical components of the journey. In this chapter, Dennis lays bare one of the most uncomfortable truths about entrepreneurship. Failure is inevitable. But here's the twist. Failure, he argues, is not a dead end. It is, in fact, a stepping stone to success if you learn how to harness its lessons and keep moving forward. From the very beginning, Dennis makes it clear that the road to wealth is paved with setbacks. There's no avoiding it. Whether you're starting your first business or expanding an empire, there will be moments when everything goes wrong. You might lose money, make bad decisions, or face unexpected market changes. And in those moments, resilience is what separates those who eventually get rich from those who give up and fall short. Dennis shares several personal anecdotes to highlight just how important resilience has been in his own life. He describes multiple occasions where his ventures failed spectacularly, businesses that crumbled, investments that tanked, and decisions that almost cost him everything. But in each case, rather than folding under the pressure, Dennis found ways to adapt, pivot, and keep going. These failures were not setbacks, they were lessons, providing insights that he used to grow stronger and smarter. One of the key messages in this chapter is that failure is not something to be feared. In fact, it should be embraced as an inevitable part of the process. Dennis argues that every failure brings with it valuable lessons, as long as you're willing to analyze what went wrong and learn from it. He talks about how failure sharpens your instincts, toughens your resolve, and forces you to think creatively. And more importantly, it teaches you humility, a vital trait for anyone who wants to navigate the unpredictable world of business. Dennis makes an important distinction between failing and being a failure. Failing is a temporary state, while being a failure is a mindset. The difference lies in how you respond to setbacks. Those who view failure as final will never achieve great success. On the other hand, those who treat it as a learning experience are the ones who eventually rise to the top. Dennis emphasizes that resilience is not about never failing. It's about how quickly you get back up after you've been knocked down. He recounts a particularly harrowing failure early in his publishing career, when one of his magazine ventures collapsed due to poor management and overexpansion. At the time, it felt like the end of the road. He had poured his heart, soul, and money into the project, and its failure left him devastated. But rather than give up, Dennis used the experience to refine his approach to business. He reevaluated his strategies, adjusted his management style, and launched new projects with a fresh perspective. Eventually, these new ventures succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. but only because he had the resilience to bounce back from failure. In addition to sharing his own stories, Dennis highlights the experiences of other successful entrepreneurs who faced similar struggles. He talks about famous business people who were on the brink of ruin before they turned their fortunes around. The common thread in all these stories is resilience. No matter how many times they were knocked down, they kept getting back up and trying again. This chapter is not just about mental toughness, it also explores practical ways to build resilience. Dennis offers several strategies for surviving and thriving in the face of failure. One of the most important, he says, is learning to manage risk. While risk is an inherent part of entrepreneurship, Dennis emphasizes the importance of taking calculated risks. By carefully weighing the potential rewards against the downsides, you can minimize the impact of failure and recover more quickly when things don't go as planned. Another key element of resilience, according to Dennis, is flexibility. The ability to pivot when circumstances change is essential for long-term success. In his own career, Dennis often had to adjust his business models, enter new markets, or even abandon projects altogether when they weren't working. He stresses that stubbornly clinging to a failing strategy is a surefire way to fail completely. Instead, successful entrepreneurs must be willing to adapt, change direction, and try new approaches when necessary. Dennis also touches on the importance of maintaining a long-term perspective. He explains that getting rich doesn't happen overnight, and the journey is full of ups and downs. Many people give up when they hit their first major roadblock because they're focused only on short-term results. But wealth building is a marathon, not a sprint. Those who succeed are the ones who understand that setbacks are temporary and that long-term resilience will eventually lead to success. One of the more profound points Dennis makes is that resilience is often born out of necessity. When your back is against the wall, when you have no choice but to keep going, that's when true resilience emerges. He recounts moments in his career when he had no money, no resources, and no apparent way forward, but somehow he managed to pull through. In those dark moments, he learned that the human spirit is capable of incredible resilience when it is tested. Toward the end of the chapter, Dennis addresses the emotional toll of failure and the importance of managing your mental and emotional health during tough times. He acknowledges that the pressure of running a business, especially in the face of failure, can be overwhelming. Stress, anxiety, and self-doubt are common companions on the road to wealth. However, Dennis encourages readers to find healthy ways to cope with these emotions. Whether it's through exercise, meditation, or simply talking to a trusted friend or mentor, maintaining your mental well-being is critical for sustaining resilience. Finally, Dennis closes the chapter with a challenge. He asks the reader to examine their relationship with failure. Are you someone who views failure as the end, or do you see it as a learning opportunity? Are you willing to keep going when things get tough, or will you give up at the first sign of adversity? The ability to answer these questions honestly, Dennis says, will determine whether or not you have what it takes to get rich. Resilience, according to Felix Dennis, is one of the most important qualities you can cultivate on your journey to wealth. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it, growing stronger, and pushing forward no matter how many times you're knocked down. In this chapter, Dennis prepares you for the inevitable challenges ahead, reminding you that wealth is not just for the lucky or the talented, it's for those who have the grit to persevere in the face of failure. We notice that 72% of you who listen to our video are not yet subscribed to the channel. Please help support the channel by hitting the subscribe button and like the video. Thanks for inspiring us to create more content for you. Chapter 6: Hiring and Firing. With the foundation of resilience in place, Felix Dennis now shifts the focus to a critical component of any business venture: people. In this chapter, Dennis explores the art of hiring and firing, stressing that no one gets rich alone. While you may start off as a one-person operation, the journey to wealth eventually requires a team. And according to Dennis, the quality of the people you surround yourself with can make or break your success. Dennis begins by acknowledging a hard truth that many aspiring entrepreneurs often overlook. Building a team is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, you cannot scale a business by yourself. No matter how brilliant or hardworking you are, there are limits to what one person can achieve. On the other hand, managing people introduces a whole new set of challenges. Employees, partners, and even advisors can bring their own personalities, agendas, and issues to the table. And navigating these dynamics requires skill and strategy. The chapter opens with Dennis reflecting on his early days in business, when he was reluctant to hire others. Like many entrepreneurs, he believed that no one could do the job as well as he could. He prided himself on being a jack of all trades, handling everything from sales to marketing to product development. But as his ventures grew, Dennis quickly realized that this mindset was holding him back. If he wanted to get rich, he needed to let go of control and start building a team. One of the key lessons in this chapter is the importance of hiring people who are smarter than you. Dennis is unapologetic in his belief that the most successful entrepreneurs are those who surround themselves with experts, people who know more about certain areas of the business than the founder does. Whether it's accounting, marketing, or operations, Dennis argues that you should always aim to hire individuals who can complement your weaknesses and bring specialized knowledge to the table. But hiring isn't just about filling roles with competent people. Dennis emphasizes the need to hire individuals who share your vision and values. The business world is full of talented professionals, but not all of them will be a good fit for your company. Dennis recounts several instances in his career where he hired people based on their impressive resumes, only to find that they didn't align with his company's culture or goals. These mismatches led to conflicts, inefficiencies, and, in some cases, the need to fire people who simply weren't a good fit. When it comes to firing, Dennis is equally direct. He insists that firing is an essential part of business, and it's something that every entrepreneur must get comfortable with. In fact, Dennis goes as far as to say that if you're not firing people regularly, you're probably not doing your job as a leader. Harsh as it may sound, Dennis believes that holding on to underperforming employees out of loyalty or sympathy can cripple a business. If someone isn't delivering results, or worse, if they're poisoning the company culture, you must be willing to let them go, quickly and decisively. In a particularly candid section of the chapter, Dennis recounts a difficult experience where he had to fire a close friend who had been with him since the early days of his business. The decision weighed heavily on him, but it became clear that his friend was no longer able to contribute at the level the company required. Keeping him on out of loyalty was not only hurting the business, but also creating resentment among the other employees who saw that incompetence was being tolerated. Dennis describes this as one of the hardest moments of his career, but also one of the most necessary. Throughout the chapter, Dennis reiterates that business is not a charity. While it's important to treat employees fairly and with respect, the ultimate goal is to create a successful company, and that means making tough decisions when needed. He encourages readers to adopt a mindset of hire slow, fire fast. Take your time to find the right people, but don't hesitate to let them go if they're not performing. Dennis also delves into the importance of trust in a team. Trust, he argues, is the glue that holds a business together, and without it, your company will eventually crumble. He speaks from personal experience, having dealt with both employees he trusted implicitly and those he later discovered were working against him. Dennis stresses the need to build a team of people you can rely on, but he also advises against blind trust. Trust, he says, should be earned, and once it's lost, it's almost impossible to regain. One of the more surprising insights in this chapter is Dennis's advice to avoid hiring too many friends or family members. While it might seem convenient to bring on people you already know and trust, Dennis warns that mixing personal relationships with business can lead to complications. Friends and family may expect special treatment, or they may be reluctant to offer constructive criticism or make tough decisions when needed. In his own experience, Dennis found that while working with friends and family can sometimes work out, it often leads to problems that wouldn't arise with regular employees. As the chapter progresses, Dennis touches on the importance of creating a positive work culture. He acknowledges that while hiring and firing are essential to building a strong team, the environment you create as a leader will determine how well that team functions. Dennis believes in fostering a culture of accountability, transparency, and mutual respect. He shares anecdotes from his own companies, where open communication and a shared sense of purpose helped his teams overcome challenges and stay focused on their goals. At the same time, Dennis advises against creating a family atmosphere in the workplace. While many companies pride themselves on treating employees like family, Dennis argues that this can blur the lines between professional and personal relationships, making it harder to make objective decisions. Instead, he advocates for a culture where employees feel valued and respected, but where business decisions are always made with the company's best interests in mind. Toward the end of the chapter, Dennis offers practical advice on how to spot the right people to hire. He emphasizes the importance of looking beyond skills and experience, focusing instead on attitude and potential. A person with the right mindset, he argues, can often learn the necessary skills, but someone with a bad attitude or a lack of motivation will drag the company down, no matter how qualified they are. Dennis encourages entrepreneurs to trust their instincts when hiring and to never settle for someone who doesn't feel like the right fit. As the chapter closes, Dennis reminds readers that the road to wealth is not a solo journey. Building a team is one of the most important investments you can make in your business, but it's also one of the trickiest parts of the process. You'll make mistakes along the way, hiring the wrong people, firing too late, or failing to build trust. But if you approach team building with the same focus and determination that you bring to other aspects of your business, you'll create a powerful force that can propel you toward success. In this chapter, Dennis lays bare the complexities of managing a team, offering hard-earned wisdom on how to hire, fire, and lead effectively. The lessons may not be easy to implement, but they are essential for anyone serious about getting rich. Chapter 7. The Role of Luck. Felix Dennis is a man who made his fortune through grit, determination, and a lot of hard work. But in this chapter, he acknowledges something that many entrepreneurs prefer to gloss over: the role of luck. Luck, Dennis argues, does play a part in becoming rich, though it is not something you can control. What you can do, however, is position yourself to take advantage of lucky breaks when they come your way. As Dennis says, luck is real, but it favors those who are prepared to seize the moment when opportunity knocks. Dennis begins by dismantling the myth that success is purely a matter of hard work and talent. While these qualities are undoubtedly important, they aren't enough on their own. Luck, being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right person, or benefiting from an unexpected market shift, can often be the decisive factor that propels a business to the next level. But here's the catch: luck won't find you if you're sitting on the sidelines. You need to be in the game, actively hustling and putting yourself in situations where luck can strike. In his usual candid style, Dennis admits that luck played a significant role in his own rise to wealth. He recalls moments when chance encounters, market conditions, or even random twists of fate opened doors that otherwise would have remained closed. For example, one of his biggest breaks came when he was introduced to a financier at a party, a meeting that eventually led to the funding of a major venture. This chance encounter wasn't something Dennis could have planned, but because he was out there networking and pushing his projects forward, he was in a position to capitalize on it when the opportunity presented itself. Yet, Dennis is quick to caution that luck alone won't make you rich. Luck is only valuable if you're ready to act when it appears. Many people, he says, squander lucky breaks because they're not prepared. They hesitate, overthink, or fail to recognize the opportunity for what it is. Dennis emphasizes that if you're not already working hard, taking risks, and building something, luck will pass you by, unnoticed. It's the combination of relentless effort and being open to chance that creates the perfect conditions for wealth. This chapter also dives into the difference between good and bad luck. While most people focus on getting lucky in a positive sense, like landing a major client or stumbling upon a new market, Dennis reminds us that bad luck is equally common. Businesses fail, markets crash, partnerships dissolve, and sometimes, despite your best efforts, things just don't go your way. But here's where resilience, as discussed in the previous chapter, comes into play. The ability to survive bad luck is just as important as capitalizing on good luck. Dennis believes that wealthy individuals aren't immune to bad luck. They're just better at recovering from it. Dennis shares stories of setbacks in his career that were the result of bad luck. He talks about deals that fell through at the last minute, projects that were sunk by unforeseen market changes, and ventures that failed due to circumstances beyond his control. In each case, he was forced to adapt, pivot, and find a new path forward. What separates successful people from the rest, he argues, is their ability to keep moving forward in the face of adversity. Bad luck will come, it's inevitable, but how you respond to it will determine whether you ultimately succeed or fail. Interestingly, Dennis also touches on the psychological aspect of luck. He argues that people who are optimistic and open to new experiences are more likely to encounter luck. Why? Because they're constantly putting themselves in situations where opportunity can arise. Whether it's attending a business conference, striking up a conversation with a stranger, or simply being willing to take a chance on a risky project, those who actively engage with the world tend to encounter more luck than those who play it safe. In Dennis's view, luck isn't just about chance. It's about attitude and mindset. One of the key takeaways from this chapter is that luck is often a product of your environment. Dennis urges aspiring entrepreneurs to position themselves in places where luck is more likely to find them. This could mean moving to a city where your industry is booming, attending events where you can meet influential people, or simply being open to new ideas and opportunities. The more you put yourself out there, the more likely it is that luck will strike. Dennis also addresses the myth of the self-made millionaire. While it's tempting to believe that the ultra-wealthy got there entirely on their own merit, Dennis points out that most successful people have benefited from luck at some point in their careers. Whether it's meeting a mentor, stumbling upon an untapped market, or catching the wave of a new trend, luck plays a part in almost every success story. However, Dennis emphasizes that these individuals didn't rely on luck. They worked tirelessly and were prepared to act when fortune smiled upon them. Toward the end of the chapter, Dennis discusses the dangers of over-reliance on luck. While it's important to recognize the role that luck plays, it's equally important not to use it as an excuse for inaction. Many people fall into the trap of waiting for the right opportunity or hoping that luck will solve their problems. Dennis argues that this mindset is fatal for entrepreneurs. Instead of waiting for luck to find you, you should be actively creating opportunities and positioning yourself for success. In the closing paragraphs of the chapter, Dennis leaves readers with a simple but powerful message. Luck is real, and it can change the course of your life, but only if you're ready to take advantage of it. You need to be constantly working, constantly moving forward, and constantly putting yourself in situations where luck can strike. It's not enough to hope for good luck. You need to be prepared to act when it arrives. Dennis wraps up by reminding readers that getting rich isn't about waiting for a stroke of luck. It's about working hard, making smart decisions, and staying resilient in the face of setbacks. But when luck does knock on your door, and it will at some point, you need to be ready to grab it with both hands. Chapter 8. Ruthlessness. In the next phase of Felix Dennis's Guide to Wealth, the conversation takes a hard turn toward a characteristic that makes many people uncomfortable: ruthlessness. Dennis doesn't shy away from the fact that to get rich, you need to be willing to make tough decisions, decisions that may not always align with conventional morality or the expectations of others. It's a controversial topic, but one Dennis tackles with brutal honesty, acknowledging that success often requires a certain level of ruthlessness that few are willing to embrace. Dennis starts by addressing the common perception that ruthlessness is synonymous with cruelty or malice. This, he argues, is a misunderstanding. Being ruthless in business is not about harming others for the sake of personal gain. Rather, it's about having the courage to make difficult decisions quickly and decisively, even when they hurt. For Dennis, ruthlessness means cutting through emotion, sentimentality, and hesitation when necessary to protect the success of your business and your own financial future. One of the key lessons Dennis imparts in this chapter is that business is not a place for sentimentality. While it's natural to want to protect friendships, honor past relationships, or make decisions based on feelings of loyalty, Dennis argues that this mindset will hold you back. In the ruthless world of business, there is no room for emotions when making strategic decisions. Loyalty, he suggests, is often overrated and can even become a weakness if it blinds you to what's best for your company. Dennis reflects on several moments in his career when he had to make tough, ruthless decisions in order to protect his businesses. These decisions weren't easy. They often involved letting go of employees who had been with him for years, abandoning projects he was personally attached to, or cutting ties with business partners who no longer served the company's interests. But, as Dennis points out, being too soft or sentimental in business can prevent you from making the choices that lead to long-term success. A pivotal example Dennis gives is the sale of one of his companies at a time when he could have held on a little longer to see it grow further. Many advised him to stick with the business, but Dennis recognized that sentimentality and attachment could cloud his judgment. He made the decision to sell, walking away with a massive profit while others clung to the idea of nurturing the business further. In retrospect, it was a ruthlessly smart decision, as market conditions later shifted and those who stayed behind suffered losses. Dennis doesn't pretend that ruthlessness comes easily. He admits that making these kinds of decisions can feel cold and sometimes even heartless, but he emphasizes that getting rich often requires pushing through that discomfort. While it's important to be fair, and Dennis advocates for ethical business practices, he also stresses that you must always prioritize what's best for the company and your financial goals. If that means cutting ties with underperforming employees, pivoting away from a failing business model, or making deals that upset others, so be it. Throughout the chapter, Dennis reiterates that ruthlessness is not about being cruel or exploitative. It's about having the clarity and determination to act in your own best interest. Many people, he suggests, fail to achieve great wealth because they're too worried about what others will think of them or too afraid to hurt someone's feelings. But Dennis argues that these fears are what separate the truly successful from those who never quite make it. In the world of business, hard decisions must be made, and often, those who hesitate or back down out of fear of confrontation end up losing out on the biggest opportunities. In one particularly striking anecdote, Dennis recalls having to end a long-standing business partnership with someone he had grown close to over the years. It wasn't that his partner had done anything wrong. On the contrary, they had contributed a great deal to the company's growth. But Dennis recognized that moving forward, they no longer had the skills or mindset needed to take the business to the next level. The decision to sever the partnership was one of the most painful of his career, but it was also one of the most crucial. By doing so, he freed the company to pursue new opportunities that ultimately led to massive success. Dennis also explores the importance of decisiveness in this chapter. In business, indecision can be fatal. Many entrepreneurs get stuck in a loop of analysis paralysis, unable to make tough choices because they're too focused on weighing every possible outcome. But Dennis argues that wealth building rewards those who can make swift, confident decisions, even if those decisions aren't always perfect. The ability to act quickly and decisively, particularly in high-pressure situations, is a hallmark of successful entrepreneurs. He contrasts this with the behavior of business leaders who wait too long to act, whether out of fear, indecision, or misplaced loyalty. In his experience, the best decisions are often the ones made quickly and with conviction. Even if the decision turns out to be wrong, Dennis emphasizes that you can always course correct, but hesitation and second-guessing can lead to missed opportunities and ultimately, failure. Toward the end of the chapter, Dennis tackles the concept of competition and how ruthlessness extends to dealing with competitors. In his view, there's no room for complacency when it comes to business rivals. He believes that entrepreneurs must be constantly vigilant, always looking for ways to outmaneuver, outperform, and outlast the competition. Dennis recalls moments in his career when he had to be ruthless in negotiations or in securing market share, recognizing that if he didn't, his competitors would. But he's quick to clarify that ruthlessness doesn't mean dishonesty or unethical behavior. In fact, Dennis insists on maintaining integrity in all business dealings. The key, he says, is to be tough and pragmatic while still playing by the rules. Ruthlessness, in his view, is about having the courage to do what's necessary, even when it's uncomfortable, not about breaking the law or cheating others. As the chapter concludes, Dennis makes an important distinction. While ruthlessness is necessary in business, it should not extend to your personal life. He cautions against letting the tough decisions required in business spill over into your relationships with friends, family, and loved ones. While wealth building demands a certain level of detachment and emotional discipline in professional matters, Dennis believes that your personal life should be a space where kindness, generosity, and compassion take precedence. Dennis wraps up this chapter by challenging readers to examine their own willingness to be ruthless in the pursuit of wealth. He doesn't suggest that everyone must adopt a cold, heartless persona to get rich. Rather, he encourages readers to develop the emotional toughness required to make hard choices. Choices that may upset others, but are ultimately in the best interest of their business and financial goals. By the end of this chapter, Dennis has made it clear that ruthlessness, when applied correctly, is not about harming others or behaving unethically. It's about the courage to act decisively, to prioritize your business over sentimentality, and to make tough decisions without hesitation. This, he argues, is a key ingredient in the recipe for wealth. Chapter 9: Avoiding the Traps of Success. As Felix Dennis takes you deeper into the realities of wealth, the tone shifts from the aggressive ruthlessness of business decisions to something subtler but just as dangerous: the traps that come with success. Dennis knows from experience that reaching a certain level of wealth brings a whole new set of challenges, ones that can derail even the most successful entrepreneurs if they're not careful. This chapter is a cautionary tale, a wake-up call for those who think that once they've made their millions, it's smooth sailing from there. Dennis begins by pointing out that success has a way of lulling people into a false sense of security. Once you've achieved financial success, it's easy to assume that the hard work is over. You start to relax, take your foot off the gas, and begin to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And while there's nothing wrong with celebrating your victories, Dennis warns that this is precisely the moment when complacency can creep in. The moment you stop pushing yourself, the moment you stop striving for more, is the moment you risk losing everything. One of the biggest traps Dennis addresses is the temptation to indulge in extravagant spending. After years of hard work, it's only natural to want to reward yourself with luxuries, whether it's a mansion, a yacht, or an expensive car. But Dennis cautions against letting these indulgences get out of hand. In his own life, he admits to having fallen into this trap, spending millions on homes, art, and other luxuries that, in retrospect, added little to his overall happiness or satisfaction. These distractions, he says, can drain your wealth just as quickly as you built it. Dennis is quick to point out that it's not just the money you spend on luxuries that can be problematic. It's the mindset that often accompanies wealth. Success can breed complacency, and complacency can lead to poor decision-making. Once you've achieved a certain level of wealth, there's a temptation to believe that you've made it and no longer need to work as hard or take the same risks you once did. But this mindset, Dennis argues, is dangerous. Wealth doesn't protect you from failure, and the moment you start coasting is the moment you begin to slide backward. He shares personal stories about how success nearly derailed him at several points in his career. After his initial success in publishing, Dennis began to relax, assuming that his companies would continue to thrive without his direct involvement. He started spending more time enjoying his wealth and less time focusing on his businesses. It wasn't long before cracks began to appear. Revenue started to slip, employees lost their motivation, and Dennis found himself scrambling to regain control. It was a stark reminder that success, if not managed carefully, can lead to complacency and, ultimately, failure. Another trap Dennis discusses is the yes man syndrome. As you become more successful, you'll find that people are more inclined to agree with you, whether out of fear, respect, or the hope of staying in your good graces. This can be incredibly dangerous for an entrepreneur. Surrounding yourself with people who always agree with you or are too afraid to challenge your decisions will lead to poor judgment. Dennis warns that without honest feedback, you risk making costly mistakes because you're not being challenged to think critically about your choices. In his own businesses, Dennis made it a point to cultivate a culture where dissent was encouraged. He valued the input of those who were willing to disagree with him, and often sought out their opinions to avoid falling into the trap of groupthink. He admits that some of his best decisions came from moments when someone on his team had the courage to push back on one of his ideas. It's a humbling realization, but one that Dennis believes is essential for maintaining long-term success. Beyond the yes man trap, Dennis also explores the psychological traps of success. He talks about the tendency for wealth to inflate your ego, making you believe that you're invincible or that your success is solely a result of your own brilliance. This kind of thinking, Dennis warns, is incredibly dangerous. It leads to arrogance, and arrogance often leads to poor decisions. Dennis emphasizes the importance of staying grounded, no matter how successful you become. He insists that while it's important to celebrate your achievements, you should never lose sight of the fact that luck, timing, and the contributions of others played a significant role in your success. Dennis also addresses the importance of continuing to grow and learn, even after you've achieved wealth. One of the most common traps successful people fall into is thinking that they've learned everything there is to know. This sense of mastery can prevent you from staying curious, taking on new challenges, and seeking out new opportunities. Dennis believes that continual learning is key to staying ahead in business. The moment you stop learning, you start to stagnate, and in a fast-moving world, stagnation can be fatal for a business. He shares how, even after becoming extraordinarily wealthy, he continued to seek out mentors, read extensively, and stay informed about trends in his industry. He acknowledges that success can make it easy to become complacent, but the truly wealthy are those who never stop growing. Dennis makes it clear that the pursuit of knowledge and self-improvement is a lifelong endeavor, and those who remain curious and adaptable are the ones who continue to thrive, even after achieving financial success. Toward the end of the chapter, Dennis addresses one final, often overlooked trap of success: isolation. As you accumulate wealth, your social circle can shrink. Friends, colleagues, and even family members may start to view you differently. Some will seek your favor, others may become jealous, and some will simply drift away, assuming that you no longer need them. Dennis reflects on how, at the height of his wealth, he found himself feeling increasingly isolated despite being surrounded by people. The more money he made, the harder it became to find genuine connections with others. Dennis warns that this isolation can lead to poor decision-making and a distorted sense of reality. Without people around you who truly care about your well-being and who can offer honest, unfiltered advice, you run the risk of becoming disconnected from the very things that made you successful in the first place. To combat this, Dennis advises maintaining close relationships with a trusted group of advisors, friends, and family members who knew you before you became wealthy and who will hold you accountable when necessary. The chapter closes with a sobering message: success, while desirable, comes with its own set of risks. The traps of wealth, complacency, ego, poor decision-making, and isolation can undo even the most successful entrepreneurs if they're not careful. Dennis urges readers to remain vigilant, to stay humble, and to continue pushing forward, even after they've achieved their financial goals. By the end of this chapter, it's clear that getting rich is only half the battle. The real challenge, Dennis says, is staying rich and continuing to grow without falling into the many traps that success can bring. He leaves readers with a final thought. True wealth isn't just about accumulating money. It's about maintaining the mindset, discipline, and drive that got you there in the first place. Chapter 10. Why Aren't You Rich? As Felix Dennis approaches the conclusion of his brutally honest guide to wealth, he leaves readers with one final critical question: why aren't you rich yet? By now, you've read about the importance of ownership, resilience, ruthlessness, and avoiding the traps of success. You've heard Dennis admit the role of luck, and you've been given a detailed look at how to hire and fire the right people. But after all of that, the question still remains, why haven't you taken the steps necessary to accumulate wealth? Dennis doesn't ask this to shame or belittle his readers. Instead, he wants to challenge you to confront the real reasons that hold you back. In this chapter, Dennis delves deep into the psychological barriers, excuses, and fears that prevent most people from ever becoming rich. And in classic Felix Dennis style, he pulls no punches. He begins by pointing out the most common excuse people use when they haven't achieved financial success. It's too late for me. Whether it's age, timing, or missed opportunities, many believe that they've passed the point of no return, that their chance to get rich has come and gone. But Dennis argues that this excuse is nonsense. He recounts stories of individuals who started businesses, invested wisely, or even switched careers later in life, and still went on to build extraordinary wealth. Age, according to Dennis, is not the obstacle, it's your mindset. Dennis doesn't shy away from the reality that getting rich is harder as you get older. There are certainly more challenges, like responsibilities to family, a more conservative risk appetite, and sometimes declining energy levels. But he insists that none of these are insurmountable. In fact, many older entrepreneurs bring a wealth of experience and wisdom to their ventures that younger, less experienced individuals simply don't have. The trick, Dennis says, is to recognize your strengths, lean into them, and take decisive action rather than using age as an excuse. The next barrier Dennis tackles is fear of failure. For many people, the thought of risking what little they have to chase wealth is terrifying. They fear losing their savings, their security, or even their reputation. But Dennis makes it clear that without risk, there is no reward. Every successful entrepreneur has faced failure at some point in their career, and many have lost everything before rebuilding. The difference between those who ultimately succeed and those who fail is their ability to push through that fear and take calculated risks. Dennis acknowledges that the fear of failure is a powerful force, and it's one that's deeply ingrained in many of us. Society teaches us to play it safe, to value security over ambition, and to avoid risk wherever possible. But Dennis argues that this mindset is what keeps so many people stuck in mediocrity. If you want to get rich, you have to be willing to face the possibility of failure, learn from it, and keep moving forward. He recounts stories from his own career where he risked everything, knowing full well that failure was a real possibility. Yet each time, his willingness to take bold action paid off in the long run. Another major reason people don't get rich, Dennis suggests, is lack of focus. In today's world, distractions are everywhere, whether it's social media, entertainment, or simply the demands of daily life. It's easy to lose sight of your goals and waste time on things that don't move you closer to wealth. Dennis emphasizes the importance of staying focused on your long-term vision. The wealthiest people are those who have learned to tune out distractions, prioritize their time, and remain laser-focused on the tasks that matter most. He admits that maintaining focus isn't easy, especially in the age of information overload. But Dennis believes that the ability to focus, really focus, on your business, investments, and wealth-building strategies is one of the key differentiators between those who achieve financial success and those who don't. He encourages readers to assess their daily routines and eliminate the distractions that sap their time and energy. Whether it's mindlessly scrolling through social media, watching hours of TV, or engaging in activities that don't align with their goals, Dennis argues that these distractions are the silent killers of wealth. One of the more surprising reasons Dennis identifies for why people don't get rich is comfort. Many people, he says, simply don't have the hunger for wealth because they're too comfortable with their current situation. They may not be wealthy, but they're comfortable enough. They have a steady job, a decent home, and enough money to cover their needs. And because of this, they lack the drive to push beyond their comfort zone and pursue real wealth. Dennis is blunt in his assessment of this mindset. He believes that comfort is the enemy of progress. If you're satisfied with mediocrity, you'll never have the fire to pursue extraordinary wealth. Dennis reflects on how his own hunger for success, even when he was already wealthy, drove him to keep going. He wasn't content with just being comfortable. He wanted more, and that desire fueled his relentless work ethic. For those who lack that same drive, Dennis advises taking a hard look at their ambitions and asking themselves if they're truly willing to do what it takes to get rich. Dennis also addresses the fear of what others will think. Many people hold themselves back because they're afraid of being judged by family, friends, or society. They fear being seen as greedy, selfish, or materialistic for wanting to get rich. Dennis acknowledges that this fear is real and that societal norms often cast wealthy individuals in a negative light. But he also reminds readers that no one else is living their life. No one else will pay their bills or secure their financial future. If you allow the opinions of others to dictate your actions, you'll never reach your full potential. In one of the more introspective moments of the chapter, Dennis reflects on how he dealt with criticism and judgment throughout his career. As someone who became incredibly wealthy, he faced his share of detractors, people who questioned his motives, criticized his choices, or simply envied his success. But Dennis never let these voices hold him back. He realized early on that if you let the opinions of others shape your decisions, you'll never have the courage to take the bold actions required to get rich. He encourages readers to develop thick skin and to trust their own judgment, rather than seeking validation from others. Finally, Dennis brings the chapter to a close by addressing procrastination. For many people, the biggest reason they haven't become wealthy is simply that they haven't started. They're waiting for the perfect time, the perfect idea, or the perfect opportunity. But Dennis argues that there's no such thing as the perfect time. If you want to get rich, you have to start now. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes, and the more opportunities you miss. Dennis emphasizes that action is the only antidote to procrastination. Start small if you have to, but start. He shares examples of people who spent years talking about their dreams of starting a business or making an investment, but never took the plunge. Meanwhile, others who took action, even without perfect circumstances, went on to achieve financial success. Dennis urges readers to stop waiting, stop making excuses, and take the first step toward building wealth, no matter how small that step may seem. The chapter concludes with a powerful call to action. Dennis challenges readers to reflect on their own lives and ask themselves why they aren't rich yet. Is it fear, comfort, lack of focus? Whatever the reason, Dennis believes that the only thing truly standing in your way is you. The path to wealth is difficult, but it's also achievable if you're willing to take responsibility for your own actions, overcome your excuses, and commit to the journey. By the time you reach the end of this chapter, Dennis has stripped away all the illusions, excuses, and fears that hold most people back from achieving wealth. He doesn't promise that getting rich will be easy, but he makes it clear that it's possible for anyone if they're willing to do the work, take the risks, and make the tough decisions. In the final analysis, Felix Dennis leaves you with a simple but profound truth. The only person stopping you from getting rich is you.